Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the Latam Monitor podcast, brought to you by London Politica's Latin America program. My name is Fernando Prats. I am your co-host and program director at London Politica, and with me is Carlos Cruz Infante, who is a consultant at London Politica. Today we have a very special guest with us, Juan Pablo Córdoba, CEO of Nuam Exchange, a platform that integrates the stock exchanges of Chile, Colombia, and Peru. Juan Pablo is an economist with vast experience in financial markets, having served as the president of the Colombian Stock Exchange for more than 15 years. He's here with us to talk about Nuam Exchange, the innovation it presents in the region, and some prospects for the future of regional markets in terms of risks and opportunities. So Juan Pablo, please let me start by thanking you for being here with us and asking you to tell us more about Nuam, what it makes it unique in Latin America, and if there is any similar case globally.
Hi, Fernando and Carlos. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's really an honor to be here with you guys and with all the people who hopefully will see this around the world. Nuam Exchange is a new, let's say, corporation who today is the owner of the stock exchange groups in Chile, Peru, and Colombia. So right from the start, it is a very unique company because it owns the main infrastructure providers in the capital markets of the three countries. As you very well know, and your audience knows, stock exchanges today are not just the venues where stocks are traded, but we run the market infrastructure where trading, clearing, and settlement of financial transactions take place, and not just in the equity market, but also in bonds, corporate bonds, government securities, FX, currencies, and to some extent derivatives. So it is a robust market infrastructure provider in the three countries. By creating a single company that owns the infrastructure in three countries, what we want to provide is the construction of a single market for the three countries. The thesis behind the need to create a single market is that in the global context of competition, local capital markets are very small in Latin America, like with the exception made of probably Brazil. The rest of the countries have very small capital markets, and we don't have sufficient scale to compete at a global level. So by creating a single market out of the capital markets of three countries, what we want to have is a value proposition where investors and issuers find a more robust, liquid, and deep capital market.
Yeah, well, that's very
Great.
interesting.
I think you may have answered part of the following question, but what are your expectations about this unique market in a more concrete, say, result, right? Because you have all the jargon of investors and macroeconomists and that, but what could any medium average citizen expect from this, or any operator from any industry, right?
Yeah, thanks, Carlos. You're absolutely right that the ultimate goal of having let's say, developed capital market is that firms can find better access to capital. Particularly SMEs face a tremendous challenge everywhere in the world, that either you have access to bank financing or you have to fund yourself from own funds, be it the cash flow or let's say the initial owner's capital. But there's very little access to financing outside of the traditional banking sector if you actually have access to the banking sector. So having capital market access amplifies the opportunities for financing of companies in general, particularly SMEs, as I mentioned. And that is very important because in many respects in our countries, competition in different economic activities is limited by the limited access to funding. So if you don't have access to funding, you can't compete with the incumbents. So developing capital markets has a tremendous potential of improving the quality of economic activity in the countries, enhancing economic activity, improving the quality, improving competition, and by improving competition and the quality of uh, let's say, economic activity, you're actually improving also the labor market. So people have better opportunities to have a job and to earn wages. And on the other side, for investors as well, if you have more companies in which to invest, you have the opportunity of creating wealth at the same time that companies are growing and generating wealth. So it's a win-win proposition to have a better developed capital market. It's a very important economic policy tool. And what we're trying to propose here is an invitation to market participants and governments to join us in developing this, let's say, integrated capital market for the three countries, where we are, seeking to improve the quality of lives of citizens in these three countries.
Okay, thank you, Juan Pablo. So yeah, I imagine that in such a challenging task and very ambitious, there might have been some regulatory risks and hurdles that you have faced and that you continue to face today. So if you could tell us a bit more about what regulatory struggles you have found and how would you foresee them evolving in the short and longer term?
Yes, Fernando, as you very well know, financial markets are regulated markets, right? So in every country in the world, and actually following best practices that are well recognized internationally, there is a set of regulation for the functioning of financial markets. Generally, that set of regulations is meant to, let's say, govern activity within a country. So there is a single country view of how capital markets are regulated. And that I would say is the main challenge, right? Because we're trying to create a single market out of three countries that traditionally, as is obvious, have had a single country view, right? So moving the let's say the frontier of regulation between a single country vision to a multi-country vision is a critical element of this proposal. But on a global scale, as we know, with globalization and particularly capital mobility, the competition is global. So you need to be relevant on a global scale. So we need to change this conversation. Right now, we have, let's say, completed the first phase of the initiative, which was the creation of this holding company to own the infrastructure of the three countries that also required regulatory approval in the three countries. This took a couple of years, but finally in November of 2023, we had final approval and the exchange of shares of ownership of the companies is already complete. We own today more than 95% of the stock exchange group in Chile, the stock exchange group in Colombia, and we're finishing a public tender in Peru in the next couple of weeks to also reach more than 95% ownership. So that phase has been completed. We have now initiated the second phase, which is the creation of a single market, particularly for the equity market, which is, let's say, our first market where we want to have a joint value proposition for participants in these markets. This has three pillars. One is the technology that enables and facilitates the notion of a single market. The second pillar is the regulation that, let's say, habilitates the creation of this single market that has two tiers. And the third pillar is market participants. We need to also encourage market participants to move from a single market strategy to a multi-market strategy and embrace this proposition as a proposition that enhances their business opportunities and their economic prospects. So in all three areas we are working. So we're working 7 by 24 in putting up the technology that will support the integrated market or the unique market, the single market for the three countries. We are working with the regulators since almost 2 years ago in the presentation of what the business model is, how the operational model will work, what risks and offsets and controls of those risks are going to be made, and also what regulatory changes with this single market vision to the multi-market vision need to be made in each country. And finally, working in parallel with market participants to bring them up to speed so that when we launch the integrated market, all market participants are ready.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Very, very interesting. Actually, you mentioned earlier these new opportunities for investors to reach new markets and new companies, at least at the unique level, right? You get already 3 markets by using just one platform, let's say. So what are for you the most overlooked opportunities in Chile's, Colombia's and Peru's industries? Because we all know about oil and energy in Colombia, mining in Chile and Peru, but what are the hidden jewels, right?
Well, thankfully, we have a lot of hidden jewels in Latin America in general, and particularly in these 3 countries. As a matter of fact, I think that the let's say startup culture has really picked up in countries like Chile, especially, and Colombia and Peru as well. So there's a lot of activity in the fintech world for these markets, and also that is not only creating new business models, but improving existing business models of existing participants. So there are, let's say, companies that are either building their own infrastructure to replace or to introduce something that is completely absent in the market, or companies that are enhancing the, let's say, user experience for established companies. Both are very dynamic and growing very fast. And when companies are growing very fast, they need capital. What we're seeing in Latin America in general is that these companies find small amounts of money locally, but when they really need serious money, they have to unfortunately go to the private equity market in the United States. When you go to the private equity market in the United States, it's great, but it means that not all companies make it. So you have a lot of these great initiatives that don't find the funding or sufficient funding, and eventually do not, let's say, continue growing or are successful. So you limit the amount of the number of companies that are successful. And the other element that happens when you go when you skip, let's say, the local capital market, is that in the end, the creation of wealth benefits, let's say, the investors from outside of the region. So the local investors are not being benefited by the creation of wealth of these companies that are growing. So what we want to create is an avenue for these companies to fund themselves locally, and also that the local investor can participate in the wealth creation. That is very important. One of the benefits of having developed capital markets is that everybody, every individual, the citizen, the typical citizen in the country can benefit from the creation of wealth that is generated by successful companies. So if you have successful companies and those companies issue capital in the market, then people that buy this capital are benefiting from the growth of these companies. So this is the ecosystem that we want to promote. There's a lot of entrepreneurs out there that need capital. We want to create a capital market that provides that capital and distributes the wealth creation in a better fashion in the region.
Okay. Yeah, it does sound interesting. And we have been discussing and talking about how this new ecosystem will benefit regional companies, regional citizens, and regional investors. But I'd like you to tell us how you see that this new integrated markets ecosystem might benefit investors from outside of the region. So European investors, American investors, even alternative market investors like in Asia, in the Middle East. How could they benefit from this new ecosystem that we are discussing here?
Absolutely, and thanks for the question. The main objective here, if you look at the of any market is to create liquidity. When you create liquidity, you facilitate the ability of investors to come into the market and actually to exit the market as well. So liquidity is very important. As I mentioned before, individual countries in emerging markets in general, but particularly in Latin America, do not have the scale, sufficient scale to attract sufficient international participants and to generate sufficient liquidity. So here, the idea is by pooling the markets together, creating more critical mass, more investors, more companies, and more intermediaries, we hope to create a better condition to foster liquidity, and that enables international participants to join in. When international participants join in, they are having access to investments that they would otherwise not have access to, and thus are able to diversify. And if these investments, as we mentioned before, are successful, they will be benefiting in the value creation of these companies. So it's really a win-win proposition if we manage to foster this virtuous cycle of liquidity, new investment, new participants, and then new companies coming to market to fund themselves.
Well, thank you. Absolutely agree with you there. And yes, super insightful conversation. Carlos, would you have anything else you'd like to ask Juan Pablo, or to add anything that we could discuss here?
Yeah, I actually do. Earlier, you were talking about this shifting from this local country vision to a free country vision. Many of our listeners think of Latin America as just one culture with some nuances, when in reality we're very, very large, interrupted geographies, really big populations, at least in the case of Colombia, well, Argentina, Brazil, etc. Might there be any these instead of regulatory or infrastructure barriers, like putting some obstacles on the process?
Sorry, Carlos, I'm not sure I followed your question, but I will take it from this angle. You're absolutely right, and I share this view. I think that for the global citizen, Latin America is a region, and you try to think of it in a very simplified way as a single entity. However, when you undergo the investment process of what a foreign investor from outside of the region faces when they're going to invest in Latin America, is that they realize that it's not a single region and a simplified process, but it's more than 27 countries with different processes, different currencies, different regulations, and all very complicated, mostly in Spanish, and not very easy to grasp. So precisely what we're trying to construct here is that at least in three countries of the region, that represent more than 100 million people in terms of population, a GDP that is almost a trillion US dollars, and a market capitalization of roughly $400 billion, you have a single market, or the vision of a single market with a single process and a single rule. So the idea here is to start precisely offering a more simplified Latin America to the global investor. You will have Brazil, which is a world in itself. You probably have Mexico, which is another story, and you will start having the rest of Latin America, starting by Chile, Colombia, and Peru, in a new product offering or value proposition. Hopefully, we can start adding other countries in the future, but for now, we're focusing in these three countries where we think we can build sufficient economies of scale. These processes are not simple, and they don't happen overnight. So you have to understand that this is going to be a process, and that reaching, let's say, full harmonization of rules will take time. But we will start with the harmonization of the market operation rules. We think that that in itself creates a lot of value for local participants. It simplifies the process. It makes it less expensive, easier to connect to, easier to invest. The cost benefit analysis becomes much more compelling, both for local and international investors. And from then on, start branching out to other, let's say, other services, not just the equities, but as I mentioned, bonds and other securities, and also inviting regulators to also continuing the avenue of harmonizing some tax treatments here and there, or some supervisory requirements here and there that are important in institutional investor regulation. So there's other homework that we will have in the future that will take time, as I say, but I think all going in the direction of creating a value proposition that makes it easier for the global investor to identify how to, let's say, move the money around and put it to productive use in these countries of Latin America. That hopefully will also have a regional expansion as we move forward, and it's not just 3 countries, but 4 or 5. When you look at the experiences in Europe, for example, Euronext started with 4 countries. Today, it encompasses 7 countries. So today, with Euronext, you can access, the securities of seven equity markets in Europe. So it will be a process, but it's a process that we are starting with a very strong footing in 3 countries that are very relevant. I would say are the next countries in terms of relevance for the investment community globally in Latin America, after Brazil and Mexico. So I think it makes all the sense in the world, and our success will hopefully lead the way, not just for countries in Latin America, but in other emerging markets around the world.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you so much, Juan Pablo. And well, I wanted to give you space to, if there's anything else you'd like to add regarding Nuam, regarding the regional markets landscape. If there's anything you'd like to comment, or something for us to close there, please go ahead. And of course, thanking you for your time, thanking you, Carlos, too. And well, yeah, if you have anything else, we're pleased to discuss it with you.
Yes, Fernando. I think an important message in the end is that capital markets are important for development, and not many developing countries or emerging markets value the importance of capital markets. And with developed capital markets, we touch the lives of citizens in ways that many people are not aware. For example, mortgages, right? Everybody that wants to be a homeowner needs a mortgage, or the vast majority of people need a mortgage. Mortgages, or better conditions for financing homes via mortgages, are enabled by capital markets. If you have well-functioning capital markets, the mortgages that are offered to individuals down the street are going to be of better financial quality, in the sense that they will be probably longer term, more aligned with the needs of the population, and the interest rate, risk adjusted, will be the lowest possible. So improving and insisting in developing capital markets is very important. Or pensions, right? I think today, if you have individual savings accounts for your old age, it's very important to have a capital market where to invest this capital, and not just invest it in government securities, but to be able to invest it in a diversified portfolio via the capital market. So capital markets have the potential of improving the lives of individual citizens in every single country. And it's probably this is not sufficiently understood, and this is why we are insisting that developing the capital markets of these 3 countries in the region is so important, and hopefully creating a model that works for many countries around the world.
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more there. And we certainly are aligned with your vision here, and with Nuam's mission of creating more efficient financial markets, not only for firms and companies, but for overall development of regional countries. And of course, while creating great opportunities for everyone. So Carlos, would you like to close with anything in particular?
Thank you so much. That was highly insightful, and we really hope this goes well, and all the three countries get benefits from this huge policy, right? It's not just about capital markets, but a state policy, I'd say.
Thank you, Carlos
Thank
and
you, Juan
Fernando.
Pablo.
Pleasure to be here with you guys, and ready to talk with you whenever you want in the future.
Thank you so much, and thank you, listeners, for being here with us in the Latam Monitor podcast. See you next time. Take care. Bye bye.